to further the point of this being a landmark move, you have added to the Mark Richt Georgia to Miami transition with Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M to Florida State. So that's a valid answer. But sorry, Texas A&M, sorry, Florida State, you are not USC or Oklahoma. Now, Florida State has been USC/Oklahoma since roughly 1980. So they have elevated themselves to that level, much like Miami did for years, to a certain extent, much like Clemson has in recent years. But historically, blue blood, Florida State is not. And Texas A&M, despite all the resources and the money and the rabid fan base and packing out Kyle Field to 105,000, they're trying to get there. They got all the window dressings of an elite program, but the results on the field aren't anywhere close to elite status.
No, you're right. I mean, and I think the list that you threw out there is valid. You have Oklahoma, you have Texas, you have Alabama, you have I'm trying to remember who all you mentioned: Michigan, Ohio State, USC. Obviously there's some more. There's some that are borderline. You can debate whether or not they're a blue blood, and like Florida State's a good example. Yeah, they've been pretty good. I mean, not recent, but since the 90s, obviously. Nebraska's one that you could make an argument. Are they at one point they were absolutely a blue blood in the 90s and early 2000s, but can you really consider them being a blue blood right now? I mean, you go 3-9 and you bring your coach back. So I mean, maybe that tells you more than anything whether or not they're a blue blood or not. But I think and Georgia's another one that's in that conversation as well.
Penn State,
Penn State, obviously.
There's some fringe teams, LSU. Yep.
But I think that at the end of the day, when you look at even a team like USC or Oklahoma, based on what they have going for them, just in terms of the facilities that they have, just recruiting, specifically at USC, but even at Oklahoma, unless you just bring in someone that is completely incompetent at the head coaching position, you're going to be marginally successful, right? But I think for Oklahoma, we've talked about this. The monster needs to be fed to a certain degree, right? We've talked about Oklahoma's aspirations this year was at the very least to make a conference championship. To make the national championship game. And not only they're not a playoff team, they're not even making the Big 12 championship game. So I think, like I said, there's so many intriguing factors of this. And talking about blue bloods, I mean, we had talked about this all year about chaos. How weird is it going into next week that Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Clemson aren't even playing? Like it's something that I've not been able to shake over the last 12 hours. That's the reality of what we're facing right here. But yeah, I think with those teams, I mean, and Oklahoma, like I said, it's been an incredibly disappointing year for Oklahoma this year in so many ways. Just starting game one and just continued to resurface almost each and every game this year. So I mean, you have to wonder, obviously, in the back of your mind how committed Lincoln Riley was here at the end of the season. It's impossible. I mean, I think you share my faith, and it's hard to serve two masters, right? And so when you have one foot out the door and you have 1 foot game planning, it's hard to be. But credit to him, and how you led this off, his ability to keep this quiet, and this was quiet for as long as it was. I mean, it's credit to him for being able to do that. So I think where Oklahoma goes from here is going to be really, really, all hires are important, but I think it's going to be extremely important ushering Oklahoma into the SEC, and based on where Oklahoma is at nationally right now.
Folks, we've been at this for about 75 minutes. We appreciate you being here, and we've had quite a crowd here. So thank you so much for your contributions, both in the live chat, just being here, your contributions through the super chat. Keep in mind that for however long we go, once we end the live stream, certainly watch what you've missed. So just wait for about 15 or 20 minutes. The video will process and post, and you can watch what you missed. Got a comment coming in from Emmanuel who says, great job, Mark, for covering the ground at breaking news. Last time USC was at the top, they blew the doors off a highly touted OU program. Of course, he's going to the 2004 BCS championship game. Yeah. Lincoln Riley could replicate Pete's SC run.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I saw a tweet or someone says that, you know, that USC hasn't killed the hopes and dreams of Oklahoma fans since 2005. So kind of brought me back to that. But no, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think the difference is, I think there's a lot of Oklahoma people that are kind of about this one way or the other. As I mentioned, fair or otherwise, I think, you know, there, to a certain degree, there is the factor that you have to consider of be careful what you wish for. You know, there's been a lot of programs that think that they're better than they are, and then they go and, I mean, how many times have we talked about Nebraska? You know, they thought they were better than Solich, and then look what has happened since then, right? There's been, I mean, a lot of different programs have done that over the years. So I think there's an element that you have to consider to the be careful what you wish for. But on the same token, I think there's some thought process that Oklahoma has, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Oklahoma has gone down a little bit just in the minds of people. I don't know about nationally, but I think locally, when you look at their trajectory, has kind of gone in a that negative spin, so to speak, just from, you know, national perception of where they're at. I mentioned the Georgia game in their very first year. You know, had a chance to win that game, and by all intents and purposes should have won that game. They lose that game. They play the next year. They play Alabama in the playoff, and really the final score was a 14-point margin, but wasn't incredibly competitive in that game. And then the next year, LSU was not competitive at all in that game. And then last year, Oklahoma doesn't make the playoffs, and then this year, they're not even winning a Big 12 championship, and probably relegated to the Alamo Bowl, maybe even the Cheez-It Bowl, based on, you know, what happens with Oklahoma State and Baylor, and if Oklahoma State gets to the playoffs. So which I think would be interesting in itself. There's a lot of moving parts to this. I mean, how interesting would it be if Oklahoma lands in the Cheez-It Bowl, and you have Oklahoma probably facing Clemson? Brent Venables is a guy that's probably going to get a call. I would guess he's a guy that's going to, at the very least, get an interview. And you have Bob Stoops, his former head coach. I think that would be an interesting, just from a drama perspective. But yeah, that trajectory has gone down, especially based on where Oklahoma was at preseason. I think a lot of us thought Oklahoma had a very good chance to challenge for a national championship, and through the course of the year, you know, you could make the argument that Oklahoma wasn't even playing like a top 15 to 20 team. So I think a lot of that has soured a few people. Some few people internally, you know, in terms of if Riley's able to be the guy. So I don't know. It's kind of it's a little bit of a amicable in terms of from a breakup perspective. So, but I think it will all, like I said, it'll all be considered. I'll be kind of considering who Oklahoma is able to get as that next head coach.